Oh wow, one of these have actually come out on time. Huh. Well, I have been catastrophically busy with school recently, and most of my hobby time was just spent repairing minis whose paint jobs had been damaged. So there's not that many minis this month, but I hope I get to use this opportunity to talk more in depth about each mini. You know, I'm normally used to using these segments to explain why the painting log is coming out in the middle of the month after, but I don't have to do that this time. So let's look at some minis, I guess. When the Unbound Legion calls themselves a truly undivided legion, they do not mean it in the same way the Black Legion or Night Lords do. They do not abscond the worship of any particular chaos god to instead worship the whole of the ruinous powers as a singular entity, but rather encourage the specialization that comes from having devotees of every chaos god. To them, worship of the ruinous powers goes above adherence to a singular legion, and so they strip their armor down to its bare ceramite, having no heraldry other than a shoulder pad colored to denote which god they worship. In that regard, you can definitely see influences from their word-bearer's founder. Unbound Nerglites will color one of their shoulders pale green to tell all of their allegiance to Grandfather Nurgle, if the horrible bloating and mutations didn't give it away already. From a painting perspective, this was my first attempt at a Zenithal highlight, and I'm a huge fan of how it turned out. The model has a very striking hue transition on the chest from light on the top and dark at the very bottom due to the Zenithal highlight, which I emphasized further by shading the bottom area more thickly and then dry brushing brown onto it. I gave the whole model an all-over wash of Nuln Oil, followed by an all-over wash of Agrax Earthshade, and it really gave the model the sort of tattered and dirty look I wanted. After I dry brushed the legs with brown as well to indicate that he had gotten mud and grime onto his boots. I gave him a swampy green base using Aster Granite, which I then painted Castellan green, and then also dry brushed brown before washing with Agrax Earthshade. In general, I'm a really big fan of how the model turned out. I also put a matte varnish on all the metal parts, which people don't recommend you do because it makes the metal lose most of its luster. But in this specific instance, it actually provided a very unique sort of aesthetic that I wanted to capture, with this person still being a plague marine. You know, they're still, like, very dirty, and I'm glad I was able to capture that. I'm super happy with how this model turned out. So, I don't know if you saw on Twitter, look at me! Making more poor financial decisions! Yeah! But I split the Warcry box with my friend Alex late last month, and I began painting the Horns of Hashut right away. They're not done yet, and I've no idea when the whole warband will be done, but I first started by painting this Ruinator Alpha, and it was a lot of fun. The lore is that the character has the same sort of mutation that Taurox has, Hashut having gifted him with literal brass skin so that he may better navigate the fiery forges of Hashut's industrialized empire. However, he now leads a vanguard force of last chancers straight into enemy territory to further expand Hashut's factories. To get the effect on the skin, I primed the entire model white. I then thinned Abaddon Black down to a glaze consistency and painted that over the flesh in such a way to where the recesses and muscle lining were heavily tinted black, but the very tops of the muscles remained almost pure white. I then thinned Balthazar Gold, which still isn't an actual gold color, down to a glaze consistency, and layered on a few even coats, which gave the muscles a natural-looking highlight while still making the muscles well-defined by very harsh shadows that make it look almost comic booky. I then gave it a gloss varnish to emphasize the effect even more, though personally in hindsight I really wish I went back and put a matte varnish down on some of the cloth parts or the coin purse. Though at what I like to call tabletop distance, that's hardly noticeable. I went for an ashy wasteland themed base, or in other words, this is the Ruinator Alpha in a moment of victory, having reduced his battlefield to mere ashes and embers, just how Hashut likes it. I achieved this by doing astrogranite debris, which is the speckly version of astrogranite instead of the smooth hilly one, and then dry brushed it with Rakarth flesh. Overall, I think the Horns of Hashut are an awesome warband and a big draw for me to play Warcry, which has become one of my favorite go-to skirmish games. However, the Dowie lover inside of me is quite disappointed that none of the models in the Horns of Hashut warband are Chaos Dwarfs. Or Chaos Dwarden, I guess. Ah, yes. I've recently been bolstering the HQ selections available to my Space Marine army, and one of them is a Maximus armor-wearing chaplain from the Horus Heresy, who can also be run as a regular chaplain in 40k. I decided to do a Mars-themed base for this guy, a decision I think I'm going to be sticking with for the rest of my salamanders, maybe even rebasing some of my older minis to also be standing on Martian desert terrain, because it's very easy to do, and also looks really cool. Paint the base brown, then paint Martian Iron Earth on the base, wash with Agrax Earthshade, and then dry brush with Troll Slayer Orange. I then also dry brushed a mixture of Troll Slayer Orange and Catachan Flesh onto the boots to make it look like there's been iron oxide dirt buildup on the boots from this chaplain trudging around a Martian desert all day. Instead of the usual Salamanders or Wyvern Hunters green recipe I go with, I used a medium dry brush from the Army Painter to dry brush moot green on the armor panels in a circular motion. This means that the armor's midtone is much brighter, and when standing next to the rest of my army appears to glow. It's like he's some kind of beacon illuminating the path of righteousness for his brethren, or something like that. I feel like this guy definitely requires some touch-ups later, but that's kind of the problem with having a color scheme that almost exclusively uses contrast paints. It's such a pain in the ass to fix mistakes that I will very often just go, it's fine, no one will notice, and just call it done. Much like this segment. Back to Warcry painting. These are two of the Shatterers, who are basically the meat shields of your Horns of Hashut warband. Despite their status as spare bodies, so far they've actually done quite a number in a few Warcry games, because in a game like Warcry, everyone's just fishing for sixes, so it doesn't really matter if your strength is in the gutter. It only takes a few sixes to put someone down. If I were to describe these folks as anything, it'd be quick to paint. Though, I'm a little disappointed in the kit itself. Not only does the Horns of Hashut have 0 dwarfs in it, despite it being a Chaos warband dedicated to the Chaos God of Chaos Dwarfs, there's also no female options in the kit other than a head swap for the Shatterers, meaning if you want to have any women in your warband, your only option is to make them the lowliest runts who your all-male Ruinators and Demolishers are going to be using as meat shields. Yikes. I feel like if this kit wasn't so aggressively monoposed, it'd be real simple to just slap a few chest options in there for the Demolishers or the Ruinators, but these guys only go together one way, which creates some problems we'll be seeing again later. In terms of painting these two, it was basically speed over everything. The model is mostly flesh, so after I just base coated the entire model in contrast flesh tones, I just did the bare minimum to get the cloth and metal bits looking nice. Quick and easy to assemble, even quicker and even easier to paint. Though on the one guy's green shawl or poncho, I guess, I found another green recipe I really like. This is Deathguard green, followed by a layer of Warboss green, and then a wash of Agrax Earthshade. Kinda looks like the old Citadel Goblin green. I quite enjoy it. As the final mini of November, we have a Demolisher with a Flame Hurler. This guy was probably the most finicky to assemble, which is what I meant when I said that the monopose nature of these models created some issues when assembling. Specifically, this guy's leg. It's supposed to fit in a very particular way, but the instructions don't tell you, and the connection point is just a smooth surface, so I wasn't able to find a rotation of this leg that sat correctly that didn't also just look weird. Oh, and also, the base this guy goes on is weirdly massive for the size of the actual mini. He's on the same base size as the Ruinator Alpha, but is significantly smaller, only about the size of a 40k cultist. So the fact that he's on this goddamn big of a base feels weird. But the paint job itself was quite fun. I've gotten a lot more confident in doing skin tones recently. If you remember in the very first painting log, I admitted that I really didn't know how to paint good-looking human skin. But now I do, and it's pretty fun. I did a little bit of wet blending on the fire effects, and the rest was just the usual fare of painting mostly metallics. Weird base size. Cool model. And that's all of November's miniatures. November was a very hectic month for me, so I'm glad I was able to get this out on time. But I still made some progress toward the goal of painting as much as I buy without having bought any more models this month. So the ratio is now 110 models painted versus 118 models bought. The reason why the goal went up despite me not buying any more models is because I already added the 6 Chaos Chosen to that number before they had arrived. And then when they did arrive, I realized the seller had also given me the Chaos Lord from the same box as a freebie. So it's now 118. But, good God, the goal is so close, I can almost taste it. With that in mind, I'll hopefully be able to get more videos out in December and get some paint on some more minis to finish out 2022 strong. And then we can start next year with a new goal. A clean slate. Thanks for watching. Storm Lord.